Have you ever just stopped and wondered how this whole thing works? You know, how billions of individual people, every single one of us with our own thoughts, feelings, and goals, somehow come together to form these massive, stable civilizations? It's honestly one of the biggest questions you can ask. Well, today we're diving into a pretty radical new paper that has a wild idea. What if the answer isn't in sociology or politics, but in physics?
Okay, so let's get right into it. The real head scratcher here is the problem of scale. I mean, there are almost 8 billion of us on this planet now. How does all of that individual complexity, all of that noise, somehow organize itself into the huge patterns we call culture, economies, and nations? It just seems impossibly complex. Think about it like this. On the one hand, you have the microscopic level. That's you, that's me, our individual thoughts, our daily actions. But then you zoom way out and you see these giant macroscopic patterns, entire legal systems, global economies, cultures that last for centuries. How do you get from one to the other? How do all those tiny little interactions build this giant complex structure? To try and bridge this massive gap, a new paper from the Cognitive Physics Initiative suggests we need to borrow a really powerful tool from a completely different field, a tool that physicists use to figure out how tiny particles create large-scale phenomena. And that tool is called the renormalization group, or RG for short. Now, I know that sounds super complicated, but the core idea behind it is actually surprisingly intuitive. It's basically a mathematical way of zooming out so you can finally see the big picture. Let's use an analogy to make this super clear. Imagine you have a picture that's made of millions of noisy, random-looking pixels. If you're zoomed way in, it's just chaos. You can't see anything. The RG process is like grouping those pixels into little blocks and then averaging the color of each block. You're intentionally blurring out the tiny, irrelevant details. And as you keep doing this, something amazing happens. A clear, stable, macroscopic image suddenly emerges from all that noise. You find the hidden pattern by ignoring the details. So the crucial point is this. The renormalization group is a formal, mathematical way to figure out what really matters at a large scale versus what's just noise at the small scale. It helps you find the fundamental rules that are governing the big picture. Now let's bring this back to society. In this new theory, individual people, well, we're the pixels. Social groups, neighborhoods, cities, those are the blocks of pixels. And that final, clear image that emerges after all that blurring and averaging, that right there is the stable, overarching pattern of a civilization. And this brings us to the most incredible insight from the paper. When you apply this zooming out process to societies, you find something amazing. They don't just evolve randomly. Instead, they are powerfully drawn towards a small number of predictable, stable end states. Physicists call these fixed points, or attractors. Think of it like valleys in a giant landscape. No matter where you start on the mountain, gravity is going to pull you down into one of just a few predictable spots at the bottom. So, what are these predictable end states, these valleys at the bottom of the landscape? The paper argues there aren't infinite possibilities. Instead, it identifies just 5 fundamental destinies, or in the language of physics, 5 universality classes that civilizations naturally flow towards. So here are the 5 possibilities. First, you've got consensus, where everyone in a society unifies around a single shared identity. Second is polarization, which, might sound a little familiar, a stable state of 2 opposing groups. Third is disordered, which is pretty much social chaos, no large-scale patterns at all. Then you can have a pluralistic hybrid state, where lots of different groups manage to coexist peacefully. And finally, there's this really fascinating kind of sci-fi one, alignment, where 2 totally different kinds of minds, say humans and AI, could form a single cooperative system. This last one, alignment, is where this whole theory gets incredibly relevant for us, right now. The paper actually uses this framework to model one of the biggest challenges we're facing: how to make sure we have a safe and beneficial future with artificial intelligence. The model boils this all down to the strength of the connections, or couplings as they call them, between humans and AI. Think of them like dials you can turn. There's a dial for how much we influence each other, and one for how AIs influence other AIs. But the really critical ones, the 2 that decide everything, are the ones that connect us: how much we influence AI, and how much AI influences us. The whole theory says our future depends entirely on how we set those 2 specific dials. And this gets us to the key prediction. The model shows that for our civilization to end up in that stable alignment state, The relationship has to be a two-way street. The mutual couplings, how we affect AI and how it affects us, they have to be both positive and strong. If that connection is weak or negative or totally one-sided, the system just won't find a stable, aligned state. It can't.
And if we get it wrong, well, the physics predicts some pretty specific and scary failure modes. Synchronization collapse, where one system basically just overtakes the other. Uncontrolled divergence, where humans and AI go down completely separate paths and don't cooperate at all. Or thermal meltdown, which is, yeah, exactly as bad as it sounds. A total descent into a chaotic, disordered state for our entire civilization. So let's zoom out one last time here. What does all of this really mean? The implication is, frankly, massive. It suggests we might be on the verge of something truly profound. The authors wrap up their paper with this incredibly powerful ambition: to establish a physics of civilizations and co-evolving minds. That's not a metaphor. They're talking about a real predictive mathematical framework that could connect the inner world of one person to the grand trajectory of an entire society. And that leaves us with a final, truly mind-bending question. If the large-scale shape of our society really does flow towards these predictable points, just like a ball rolling down into a valley, how much control do we really have? Does understanding these laws give us the power to choose our destination? Or does it just reveal a future that was, in some sense, always going to happen anyway?